So today is lesson 13, and we've got a few things we're going to do today. We are going to explore the assignment 3 submissions. We're going to talk about the final exam, which will be next week. We're going to look at the use of environment files in both our Angular application and our Node Express application. We're going to look at compiling our Angular app to optimize it, and then we want to bundle them together. So right now we actually have two separate projects, and in order to run our mean stack application, we need to run both our Node backend on port 3000 and our Angular frontend on port 4200. That also creates a challenge when we go to deploy this to the web server, because we actually have two separate applications. So we're going to bundle them together so it can run as a single application, and then we can actually deploy it to Heroku. So our app will actually run at localhost 3000, but the Angular front end is going to be integrated, so we don't have to have two servers running on two different ports simultaneously. I know originally I did change the, you may notice in our syllabus, the topic for today was Jwt Authentication. I've decided that I didn't want to leave. I've taught this mean stack lesson in the past, but haven't really done a full description of the bundling process. And students had asked to see how to do that. And I think the Jwt is just going to take us too long. So I felt like it would be leaving kind of a loose end to not bundle the app together this way and learn how to deploy it. So we're gonna leave out the JSON web tokens. So yes, I will encourage you to use and even if you're watching the video later from home, please use the assignment 3 gallery to post your link to the assignment. I think it's good for several reasons. One, yeah, it gives you a chance to kind of celebrate each other's work. You get some other ideas and some inspiration. And as Fatima said, looking at other people's gives you ideas for your own project. And it's a chance to provide some feedback. We had that lab in lab 2 where you proposed, assignment 1, you proposed what you were going to do, but assignment 2, you proposed what you're going to do, but lab 2, you got feedback from one person. So this is a chance for you to go back and see, well, what did that person actually build? And how did the project come out? So I will encourage you all to post your links and just provide some, respectful but constructive feedback. Chris, I didn't plan on using cloud storage. So the short answer is no, I haven't really prepared that. It's a good question, but I would probably have to help you find another resource on that. So my goal today was compile the Angular app, bundle it into our server app, use environment variables, and then publish the entire thing as a single standalone application. Was what we were going to do today. Okay, that might be something, yeah, I could help you look at, but be outside of the scope for today. So please, I'll encourage you to go ahead and use the gallery to post your link and share some feedback. I do want to talk about next week's final exam. So the exam will be done during our regular class time. So I will open the WebEx room by 10:50 next Wednesday, and the exam will start right at 11. You'll have to submit by 2 p.m. The exam is all practical, so very sort of similar format to the midterm exam. You'll just be given an application to build. You'll have access to all of the resources from the semester. There will be multiple versions of the exam, so not everybody will get the exact same requirements list. I will ask you to make new commits to Git every 30 minutes so that I can see your process and the evolution of your work. And you'll be able to use the chat window if you have questions about the requirements, though debugging assistance will be something I won't be able to provide. The focus, the exam, it does cover the entire course, but because we already had a midterm exam that really focused on some of the fundamentals, the focus will be more on the things we've covered in the latter half of the course. And that will be around potentially around authentication and Angular. Because we've already assessed you a few times now on the midterm exam and your assignment 2, I really assessed your CRUD with MongoDB through Express. So Angular will be the primary focus. So if you are a bit behind, Morning Hung, if you are a bit behind in some of the Angular work, I would recommend you use the material that's on Blackboard and GitHub and YouTube over the next week to go ahead and catch up on that content. We will be using Angular to build the final exam application. I think that was everything I wanted to tell you about the exam that I could think to tell you, but I will open it up if there's any questions. Fatima, I can try. That's a good question. So Fatima is asking, could I give out a mock test for practice? I will try it's not a bad idea, and I'm not objecting to the idea in theory. My only reservations are, number one, I have assignments to mark in all my classes, and I do want to get everybody's assignments marked in all the classes before their final exam, so everybody knows what their grade is going into the exam. So one is just a question of time. If I can get through all of the marking I have before then in order to do it. The other thing is there's a bit of a balance between, yes, giving you practice exercise is useful, but I also don't want to make it too much like the final exam that in effect I'm giving you the exam before the exam. So if I can reasonably come up with the time and a way to do it, yes, I will. I don't have a mock one ready to send out right now. Our exam is Wednesday. I will commit to trying. Okay, I'll see what I can do. Okay, so the focus will be CRUD, but with using an Angular front end. Okay, so I can tell you that right now. Because everything else we've done in the course has already been assessed, either in the midterm exam or in one of your assignments. But we had no assessment at all about working with Angular other than the quiz, which was just question and answer. But in terms of assessing your skill in working with Angular, I haven't done that at all. So that's really going to be the focus. So that part I'm happy to tell you. Okay, again, if I can come up with something in a reasonable amount of time that is not too close of a replica to what the exam will be, then I will post it and email the class with an announcement to let you know. But I can't promise that. I'll see what I can do. But thank you for this suggestion. Maybe I'll be more prepared for that to do that in the future. Does anybody else have any other questions about the exam? Okay, if something else comes to mind that you're not thinking of right now, but during the class or after class, by all means, use the chat in class or send me an email later if there's anything else in regards to next week's exam that you would like to know. Okay, so let's open up we actually need to open up both of our projects. I'm going to open up our Node backend API project first. So I'm going to open up our NodeTunes SPA server project. And we'll just quickly take a quick peek through what we did last week. So with this project, or I guess what we did 2 weeks ago. So it's a regular project created with the Express generator. And we kind of imported our configuration file. We imported our model from our original Node application. And then we rewrote, though, the big change was that we rewrote the controller. So our artist controller, does anybody recall what was the main difference between the controller in our single page application and the controller file in our original NodeTunes website? They ultimately had the same kind of functionality, but there was one really important difference. You open up your server project. Okay, so yeah, that's right, Chris. So this one only talks to the database. There's no reference, there's no rendering of views. And as Adam mentioned, we also used the put and delete methods for performing update and delete. Whereas in our web application, we really only used get and post. So we had a get handler and the URL was, /delete. So then we ran the delete. So notice all we are returning here, this is a REST API, so we are only returning JSON. There's no reference to any sort of front end. So what we want to do now, we did use our database connection. So right now we've got our database connection in our client server, which later on we're not going to need this. We put these in a global configuration file. And then when our app runs, right, we were linking to our configuration file and we were using that variable in our database connection. So this works, and it works both locally and live, but there's actually another way of doing this in Node that I want to show you that allows us to set variables differently for different environments. So this might have been helpful, for example, with like our GitHub callback URL. We had one URL when we're running locally. We wanted to use a different one when we were running our application live on the server. So in our node structure, we actually have a way we can do this. And that's using what are called environment files and environment variables. So I'll throw this link, actually, I should put this link up on Blackboard, but I'll put it in the chat as well. We'll just take a quick look at a tutorial showing kind of how this works briefly. Blackboard. So I put the link here as well. We'll have a quick peek at how this works. So we'll have something like we've got this environment file where we can set our environment depending on whether our app is running in production mode, test mode, or development mode. So we've got this node_env variable. So this is actually a global object in Node. So for example, we can try this out. If I go to my server, go down to my terminal, if we do a console.log node.env, let's see what this does. Sorry. Console.log process.env. I'm really good at this. Okay, it's actually not telling us. Interesting. Okay. I thought it might give us. We'll come back to this. So we can create, there's an npm package called .env, which we're going to want to install. And then this allows us to load variables from our environment file. So this way we could set different values for production and for development. If I log into my Heroku panel, Heroku also has a spot for us to set environment variables in production. I'm just going to log in, go to my Authenticator app. If I go and look at our node tunes, in the settings, we can actually set environment variables here. So this way, it allows us to use, if we want to have different values when we're working locally or working live, we can do this. So for example, we could add a GitHub callback URL that would be different on the server than in our development environment. So we're going to install this .env package and then set up an environment variable we can use. So at the command prompt for our server, we'll do npm i.env. So I'm going to install this package. See if I can fix any packages. I don't think that'll work. Okay, I'm not going to worry about that. So now we're going to create a .env file in our project root. I'm going to right-click my project. I'm going to create a new file, which I will call .env. So I'm going to move my database connection string. Rather than reading it from the globals file, we're going to set it here. So I'm going to create one called database_URL. And then I'm going to go and grab my database connection string. I'm going to grab that value out of my configuration, and I'm going to paste it here. A thing to note is there's no spaces in these files. So my value comes immediately after the colon. So I'm going to save that environment file. And then we can set our application, if it's not running in production mode, we're going to tell it to include or read values from our environment file. When our app is in production, it's going to read the values from the Heroku portal here. Okay, so I've set up my database connection in my .env file, which is now here in the root. And then we're going to go to our app.js. And instead of using our globals file, we'll say if our process.env .node environment is not equal to production. And this bracket goes over here. Then we're going to require the .env.config. If in dev mode, use our .env file for our config variables. So now we can change this. We're not going to need the globals file for this anymore. Now I can use my process.env. We can use the database URL variable from our environment file. When our app is running on Heroku, this gets ignored. And this database URL is going to be populated from our configuration variable. Do we absolutely have to use the env file? No, we don't. I mean, it's working with our globals file, but using the .env files is probably the more standard approach. And it offers us the flexibility to use different values for development and in production. Now I should run my application again to make sure that my API is still working. Right? So I'm no longer reading the connection string from the globals file. I'm reading it from my environment file instead. So to check this, I can run my site with nodemon. Okay. Let's see why. Okay, so it tells me it didn't connect. I'll just try my API. I think we missed one step in the process. Okay, I need a minute to think about why our process.env didn't work. Do we need to declare it? I don't think so, Adam. It's a good suggestion. Once we install the .env, it should automatically have access, but let's just see. I think I am missing one thing here. Let me just think for a moment. Because once we install .env, it should recognize this. Let me go back here. I obviously missed a step. Sorry. Just pause for a moment. Helps to have students that are smarter than you are. My apologies. Okay. First of all, syntax error in the .env. Yes, this should be an equal sign. So replace the colon with an equal sign. It's not a JSON object. That's number one. And number two, okay, oh no, we are here. We are requiring it. So we're requiring this when our app is not in production. Try again. Yes, so it is connected. So the issue was actually our equal sign. Thank you. Nice catch, Adam. Yeah, we do have it. My apologies. Okay. So our API is now running. Now that we've got an equal sign in our env file. Small problem, but enough to break it. Okay, so we can load our data now using the connection string in our environment file. Okay, so that's part one. We can also add, so what I want to do now is I'm now going to publish just the API to a new Git repository and new Heroku site. And we'll want to specify the database URL in the Heroku configuration. Because here we're not in development mode, we're in production mode. So it's not going to read our connection string otherwise. So I'm just going to go back. Let's see, I'm going to get rid of, bear with me, I've got to get rid of a project. Ujwal, I know you invited me, but that'll keep me from Ujwal is not here. He's invited me. Okay. I'll have to get rid of another one of my apps. That's okay. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is I want to put my API up on GitHub. You'll notice also, if I open up the git ignore file, that the git ignore for Node, it ignores all of the environment files. So when I upload this to Git, this .env file is not going to be included, which means when we deploy it to Heroku, it doesn't have access to the database connection. That's why we'll specify the database connection directly in the Heroku portal. So I'm going to go to GitHub and I'm going to make a new repository. So I will make a new repo, which I will call no tunes full stack. So I'm just going to make an empty repository. And now I'm going to push all my code going to make sure I've got my git ignore file here. So I'm going to push my backend to GitHub, and then I want to deploy it to Heroku. So initialize git here. Oh, I already have this on GitHub. Sorry, I don't need a new repository. If you don't have your single page app though, I forgot, mine's already here. I've already got this server here. Forgot I already had it on GitHub. If you don't have a repository for your single page application though, you'll want to create one. So I'm going to add. So it's lesson 13.1. Move DB to env. So I'm going to push these changes up to GitHub. So you'll notice my environment file, it's not here. I'm now going to deploy this to Heroku. So make a new app. No tunes, full stack. I'm going to connect it to my Node Tunes server. I'll enable automatic deployments, and I'm going to deploy my app. So there's no front end here, but I should be able to use the API. So I can, for example, if I go to view it, so it loads, and if I run API/artists, I want to see all our artists in JSON format. Right, here's my local version. I'm trying to run the same thing on Heroku. Now you'll notice it doesn't seem to be working. Okay, we got an error. So how come, any ideas why this error happened? How come it works locally, but when I deploy it, I don't get, when I call my API, right, we need the DB connection because our environment file, that holds the database connection, it gets excluded by Git. So how do we set that connection in the Heroku portal? I'll go to settings. And then in here, I have a reveal config vars. So I'm going to copy and paste the key and the value from my environment file. So the key is called database underscore URL. And this is kind of the common naming convention, that they're in all caps with underscores for multiple word variables. And then I can copy in my connection string. I don't need the quotes here. So I'm going to add my connection string. And now I'm going to try it again. And now it works right away. So as soon as my database connection is added as the configuration variable, my API is going to work. Okay, so this way, for example, if we wanted to include, let's say, like our GitHub callback URL, we could put it as an environment variable. And then that way we have different values. When we're in development mode, the value would be different from when we're in production mode on our server. Or let's say we wanted to deploy 2 different versions on Heroku and have like a staging and testing site as well as a production site. We could actually set the environment to staging or testing and set, use a different database, for example, with different values and variables, so that we want to leave our production system alone. Okay, I apologize. A couple of stumbles through this. It's working the way we want. We do want it. Do anybody want to see any of this parts again, or have me review anything we've done so far? It is with me anyway. We've got the environment variable. We've moved our database URL here. In app.js, if we are not in production mode, we are going to require our .env. And then we are going to use our environment file with our database connection here. We published the modified API to Git. We pushed. And then we added the same database key and value in the under settings and config var section of the Heroku panel. If you're deploying a site to Microsoft Azure, they also have a similar, I think they call them environment, it's called, the section is configuration or environment variables. So again, we can have a set of variables in the Azure portal where the values are different from the variables in our development environment. So we could use like testing API keys, a testing database, anything like that. It's also more secure because these values are not stored in our application code. They are not included in our Git repository. So it's also more secure to use the environment variables. Now we're going to work more with environment variables today because they're also supported by Angular. In fact, Angular already has 2 different environment files built right into our project that we can use. I'm going to leave my API, my node server running, but we also now want to open up the Angular project in a new window. So I'm going to open up my Node-tuned SPA client as well. And I'll open that in a new window so I've got both projects open. Maybe I'll close up all our files just because getting a little unwieldy. So you'll notice in our Angular app, there's a folder here called environments. And there are two environment TypeScript files. This is the production environment, right? That right now just has a setting of production is true. And then we've got, and this file is called environment.prod.ts. We also have an environment.ts that is used as a development. So here production is false. Our environment name is dev. And we've added the API server. We added this in here so that our Angular service right? We used our development environment.api server here. So our environment here, our API server works, but in our production file, we'll want to set the API server equal to our live URL. In development mode, we're running on we hit our API in localhost 3000, but in production mode, we're going to be using this URL instead, right? That's the path to our API. So let's make that change quickly. Let's make that addition. So we've called it API server here. So we'll create an API server variable here. And then I need to copy the root domain of my Heroku application, because this is going to be the path to the Node API. So we already added our API server to our development environment file. We now need the live API server in our production environment file. So this way our Angular app will know when we're running locally that our API lives here. But if our app is in production, our API lives here. Yeah, we don't need it because it's production equals true. That's right. So the issue here is if we say production is false, the common environment names are usually dev and test. Those are the kind of the standards. You can make your own, but those would be the standards: prod, dev, and test. But by default, yeah, as long as we say production is true. So you could add an env name property. It wouldn't be wrong. It's not really necessary. Okay, so what we'll do is let's take a pause here. I've already uploaded my server code, and here I've only made this one change to the Angular client. So let's take a 10-minute break here. When we come back, we're going to look at bundling our Angular app, at minifying it, compressing it, and optimizing it. And then once we do that, we're going to have to make some configuration changes in both applications so we can actually bundle them together and deploy the whole thing to Heroku as a single application. Okay, we should be able to do that, I think, and probably wrap up early by around 1 o'clock today. Okay, let's take 10 minutes. We'll come back just after 12 o'clock.